13 signs a Sagittarius energy field is so powerful it leaves others unsettled. Have you ever walked into a room, no one said anything, but you still knew that something had just shifted? A space that quietly changed. A glance brushing against the silence. Something invisible touching others before you even had a chance to speak. If you've ever experienced that moment, then perhaps you carry within you an energy field so powerful it causes the world around you to pause. And if you are a Sagittarius, the child of Jupiter, the symbol of expansion, truth, and spiritual journey, then your presence is not simply part of the room. You are not just in the room, you are the room. You are the wind that brings truth. You are the light that makes it impossible for others to remain in the dark as they are used to. You don't need to be loud, nor do you need to wear anything flamboyant. Your aura, that pure and intense energy field, has already arrived before you even step in. And the truth is, not everyone is ready to face such a source of energy. For someone in midlife who has been through many ups and downs, you know well that some things in life cannot be explained with words. There are moments, intuitions, deep sensations that do not lie on the surface but reach straight into the soul. You don't need proof. You don't need others to acknowledge it. Because you feel it with everything you've lived through. That is the clearest manifestation of aura. Throughout your life, you may have often been misunderstood, envied, or kept at a distance simply because you are real. But today, you will understand that it is precisely that realness, that energy you carry with every presence, that is the gift the universe gave you. In this journey, we will explore 13 signs that your aura, especially when you are a Sagittarius, is so powerful that it makes others uneasy. Not so that you change yourself, but so you recognize your own worth. And if you stay with me until the end, you will see that light doesn't need to be loud to be noticed. It only needs to be honest. Listen closely. Feel it with your whole soul. And if your heart recognizes itself in every word, don't hesitate to leave a sign of connection with a simple sentence. My aura speaks before I do. Those who truly walk the path of awakening will recognize each other without any introduction. I once sat quietly in a meeting, among well-dressed people, fluent in speech, and everything seemed to be functioning as it should. But within that silence, I sensed something very strange. A man entered, he didn't speak, didn't try to attract attention, didn't even attempt to impress, but the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Every eye passed over him, then looked away, then tried to glance again. There was something about him that made people both curious and cautious, as if they were placed in a situation they couldn't avoid. At that moment, I couldn't name the feeling. But many years later, I understood it was his aura. And later, when my life journey brought me to the world of astrology, I understood even more clearly. That man was a Sagittarius. And what he carried with him was not arrogant confidence, but the undeniable presence of someone who had reconciled reason and soul. You know, a true Sagittarius doesn't need to speak much to make others reflect on themselves. They don't need to claim the spotlight. Because they are the center, not of the stage, but of energy. And the first sign that your aura is powerful enough to make others uneasy is this. You cannot be ignored, even when you don't speak. What you carry is not about appearance. It is about being honest with yourself, the freedom to live your essence, and the quiet light of a soul that has fallen, stood up, and kept walking. Others feel your presence, even when you make no effort at all. But for that very reason, you will always make some people feel unsettled. Because your aura arrives first, and it communicates directly with their subconscious, where they've buried too many unnamed things. This may make you feel out of place in a world that favors what's easy to understand and control. But do not step back. The deep lesson here is this. Not everyone is born to walk the beaten path. Some people, like you, are created to awaken what is sleeping inside others. And that is something sacred. Remember this. Your aura is the whisper of your soul. And if you've ever felt misunderstood just because you are too real, then please do not change. Let those who are searching for themselves see the light in you, a light that does not scream, but never gets extinguished. If these words touch you, leave me a sign. Just one sentence, but a key to recognize each other in the crowd. I am here, I don't need to explain. Have you ever wondered why someone reacts strangely the first time they meet you? Not because you did anything wrong, not because you said anything hurtful, yet you still received cautious glances, interrupted eye contact, or unusual pauses in the conversation. Some people become distant. Others seem drawn to you but don't dare come closer. You feel like you're causing something, even though you're simply being yourself. And I want to tell you this, a deep truth I also had to learn through many years of feeling misplaced. A strong aura is not always welcomed. Especially when you are a Sagittarius, someone who carries the light of truth, intuition, and spiritual freedom. You don't need to speak for someone to feel seen through. You don't need to touch them for them to feel exposed. That is not your fault. That is how your aura works. Carl Jung once said that every person carries a shadow, a collection of parts we had to reject, bury, or forget in order to be accepted. But that shadow doesn't die. It waits for a light real enough to confuse it. And you, the Sagittarius who carries the energy of Jupiter, are that light. Not everyone is ready to face the darkness within themselves. And when they're not ready, they will push you away. They'll think you're too blunt, too hard to understand, or even just too different. But you know what? That light is exactly what makes you necessary. Because there are souls, even if they don't understand why, who feel healed just by being near you. Some will be confused, but some will awaken. And that's why you must not hide yourself. The lesson here is not about making people understand you right away. It's about daring to live authentically, even when no one stands with you. Because one day, the light you carry will no longer make others feel uneasy, it will become a place for them to return to. If you are listening to these words and feel something within you quietly resonate, that's no coincidence. Maybe you've endured judgmental stares just because you're too real, too deep, too unlike anyone else. But don't fold yourself to fit into a world that isn't wide enough. Write me a line, so we can recognize each other among the millions of voices drowning out what truly needs to be heard. I didn't hurt anyone, I just made them face themselves. I still remember one late afternoon, near the end of the year, when I was walking through a forest near the countryside of America. Only the sound of the wind weaving through pine trees and the gentle touch of my footsteps on the earth could be heard. In that moment, I felt something very alive, not from anything visible, but from an invisible sense of kinship between myself and nature. A small deer stood a few steps away, not running. A sparrow landed near my feet, not startled at all. And that's when I realized, there is a language that needs no words and still. All of nature trusts it. It is an aura so real and quiet that even the natural world feels its safety. As a Sagittarius, you possess a frequency that allows children, animals, and even plants to feel at ease. Not because you're gentle or careful, but because the energy you carry is not fake. Not manipulative, not wounded. It is something the primal world understands, because it is pure. In modern society, we are taught to communicate with words, glances, gestures. But in the instinctive world, only one thing is trusted, the true frequency of your soul. If you've ever had a stranger's child run up to hug you, a cat sit beside you when you were sad, or a strange flower bloom along the path you walked, then know that it's not coincidence. It is the natural world's response to someone whose aura is clear and safe, someone whose life force doesn't deceive. And do you know what lesson that brings? That you don't need to explain much to be understood. The silent world, the beings without language, already see you. So if anyone has ever said you're too different, too distant, or not easy to understand, perhaps it's only because they've become so used to artifice that they no longer recognize what is true. But nature has never lost that ability. And you, the Sagittarius who carries the light of inner freedom, are a frequency nature still recognizes. Even when humans sometimes forget. Continue to maintain that consistency in your energy. Continue to live straightforwardly, gently but powerfully, silently but fully present. If you've ever been loved by a small creature for no reason at all, write me just one line. Nature recognized me, even when people didn't. I know there will be those who quietly hear that sentence and understand. There are days when you just want to walk into a room, offer a gentle smile, and quietly keep to your own corner. But then, you notice the glances begin to shift. No one says anything, but the atmosphere changes. People adjust their posture. Someone gives a forced smile. A few start talking more than usual, or suddenly go silent, as if you've brought something that unsettles them. And you ask yourself, what did I do wrong? But in truth, you did nothing wrong. It is your stillness that stirred them. Because your aura, with all its truth, clarity, and coherence, unintentionally becomes a mirror exposing the things others are trying to hide. Sagittarius doesn't try to appear superior. But it's exactly that lack of effort that makes others feel off balance. Not because you apply pressure, but because you don't need to. The lesson here is not about learning how to make others comfortable. It is about standing firmly in your own being, even when that presence reveals what others are not ready to face. If you've ever noticed people become cautious around you just because you are honest, don't be disheartened. Leave me a message, as a way for us to not feel alone in a noisy world. I'm not trying to impress. I just can't pretend. Because sometimes, your mere presence is what forces the world around you to look inward. Some people enter a space and leave behind noise. But others enter and leave behind transformation. Sagittarius belongs to the second kind. You don't need to make long speeches or display anything flashy. Just your presence changes everything. Those who seemed comfortable suddenly adjust their posture. Lively conversations slow down. The room seems to shift its frequency, not because of noise, but because your quiet energy field begins to expand. Carl Jung once said, "The symbolic presence of an individual can activate the collective unconscious." And that's exactly it. You don't just bring yourself, you carry symbols, lived experiences, and deep lessons embedded in your energy. And that aura touches the space around you. Others can't explain it, but they feel it. Your silence is not emptiness, but a kind of invisible power. The lesson here is, you don't need to do much to make an impact. You only need to be real. And if you've ever seen everything gently shift when you come near, it's not an illusion. It is the whisper of the energy field you've carefully built from healed wounds. Write to me if you've ever noticed the movement in a room when you walked in. Just one sentence. I've changed a space, just by being present. That is what those who carry true light always do, not by effort. Just by being themselves. There's a strange gift no one teaches you, no school ever explains, but you carry it as if programmed from a past life. It's intuition. A way of knowing that needs no reason, no proof, yet is always right in the moment you choose to trust it. As a Sagittarius, you don't live solely by logic or emotion. You live by a third rhythm, a mysterious, deep rhythm of the universe that plays inside you. You walk into a place and instantly know something is off. Even when people are smiling and everything seems normal, something whispers inside you to be cautious. Or the opposite. You glance at someone briefly, don't talk for long, yet you feel their warmth, their honesty, or the fragility they're trying to hide. That's not guessing. It's the language of aura when purified and awakened. It becomes a living antenna, catching even the subtlest signals. No noise. No attention seeking. Just a form of presence your mind learns to trust over time. Don't let anyone make you doubt that gift. Because this society often values what can be measured, tested, explained. But some things lose their essence the more you try to measure them. The lesson here is: trust the first feeling. The one you receive before your mind can even explain it. Because that is the whisper from the deepest part of you, the part that the universe has already connected before you say a word. In life, intuition doesn't always help you make the easiest decisions. But it helps you avoid unnecessary pain. It helps you choose the right person to trust, the right place to step into, and the right moment to step back. Not because you have a sixth sense, but because your energy is quiet enough to hear the voice of your soul. If you've ever walked into a space and felt everything was heavy, even when no one said a word. Or if you've ever met someone and after just a few minutes, you knew they were smiling to hide something. Then know this: you're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're just reading a language the world has forgotten. And if that story is part of your life, I invite you to write one sentence as affirmation. No explanation needed. I trust what my heart knows before my mind interferes. Because sometimes, what keeps you from losing your way is not a compass, but a vague feeling only you understand. And only when you dare to trust it, it becomes the light that guides you. Have you ever tried to smile and nod through a conversation while your mind was drifting somewhere else? Not because you disrespected the other person, but because every word, every polite exchange, felt completely empty to you. As a Sagittarius, you carry within you an undeniable need to live truthfully, to connect authentically, to touch something meaningful. And that is why shallow conversations exhaust you. What others call normal social behavior, to you, feels like a draining performance. Because you feel it clearly, in every cell of your being, that behind that smile, there is no presence. That the conversation has no soul. And even though you've tried to fit in, tried to follow the social scripts laid out for you, sooner or later you realize your energy cannot tolerate what is fake. You weren't born to talk about the weather when there's a storm raging inside. You can't nod along to small talk when your heart is starving for a real connection. And that doesn't mean you're difficult or cold. It simply means your aura, an energy field that has undergone many rebirths, now only wants to make space for what is sincere. The lesson here is: not every conversation deserves your energy. And you don't need to apologize for that selectiveness. On the journey of growth, you will come to realize you are not alone, you are just refining your world. Fewer conversations, but deeper ones. Fewer relationships, but more genuine. And silence begins to feel like sacred space, no longer a void that needs to be filled with noise. You don't need hundreds of people to understand you. You only need a few souls pure enough to listen when you're saying nothing at all. If you are hearing this and realizing you once felt drained trying to maintain connections that were no longer real, then you are not lost. You are simply crossing into a new threshold, where your soul wants to speak to another soul, not role to role. If that has ever happened to you, please leave me a sign, a sentence that acts like an identification ticket. I don't want to talk much. I just want to be truly present. Because sometimes, a quiet but honest look carries more life than 1,000 hollow words. There is a strange feeling that those with strong auras like yours often experience. It's the confusion caused by disproportionate reactions from others. You enter a relationship with goodwill. You bring honest presence. You don't try to hurt anyone. Yet someone suddenly gets angry. Someone begins to avoid you. Someone looks at you as if you've touched a wound they didn't want to acknowledge. At first, you blame yourself. You think maybe you said something wrong. But then, looking deeper, you realize You did nothing. You were just a mirror. And the light in you accidentally illuminated what the other person was trying to hide. Jung called this the projection of the shadow, the buried, rejected parts in each person. When you show up with honesty and coherence, you are not just arriving as a person. You bring an invisible reminder, it's time to face yourself. And not everyone is ready for that. So they react, not to you, but to themselves. Through you. Your aura doesn't create conflict. But it awakens. And awakening, sometimes, hurts. The lesson here is, you must learn to distinguish what is yours, and what others are throwing onto you. When you receive unreasonable criticism, silent rejection, or even excessive admiration, ask yourself, is this really mine, or is it their projection? Because those who carry strong light don't just attract like-minded souls. They also stir up the parts in others that haven't yet healed. And that's not a fault. That's a role. If you've ever been misunderstood, judged by people you never harmed, don't fold yourself. Stand tall, gently, and understand. I'm not the problem, I'm the mirror. And the mirror is not responsible for others' fear when they see themselves reflected in it. If this has ever happened to you, write me a sentence. Like a vibration of truth among the noise of deception. I'm not the one who causes pain, I simply reflect what needs healing. Because in this world, sometimes, your gift is the only thing real enough to make others finally look at themselves. There is a kind of silence that not everyone understands. It doesn't come from hesitation, nor from a lack of things to say. It is the silence of someone who has come to understand the power of presence. Someone who doesn't need words to prove anything. Who doesn't try to impress, because they know this. True aura doesn't lie in speech, it lies in how you hold the space around you. Sagittarius carries a special kind of energy. You can express, explain, persuade. But you can also just sit quietly, and simply be there. Yet the atmosphere around you still changes. People still feel something, a soft but steady vibration, radiating from you. Making them pause. That stillness doesn't pressure. It doesn't frighten. But it does compel others to face themselves, because there's no noise loud enough to distract from their inner truth. This is the power of someone who has learned to hold energy rather than scatter it. The lesson here isn't just knowing when to speak. It's knowing when you no longer need to. You don't need to argue to be validated. You don't need to explain to be accepted. Because your energy, when truly at rest, already says it all. I believe you've sat in a crowded room, not saying a word, yet someone kept glancing at you. Or you walked into a space, didn't speak, but your presence caught attention. Not because you were flamboyant, but because you were fully there. And that is something very few people can do. Don't underestimate the power of silence. Don't rush to fill every space with words. Because some souls, like yours, carry entire worlds just by sitting still and breathing with the room. If you've ever felt that you made an impact without saying a thing, that's not an illusion. That is a sign your aura has reached the level where it can hold and transmit life just by existing. Write me one sentence, like a silent signal amid the noise. I don't speak much, but my energy always speaks. Because for those who carry true light, silence is sometimes the highest form of truth. I once sat in a small cafe on the outskirts of town, quietly watching people pass by, each carrying their own rhythm of life. Then a moment made me pause. A woman sitting alone at the next table suddenly began to cry. She said nothing, just stared out the window, as if a wave of emotion had come from somewhere far away, or from something deeply touched. Later, she looked over at me, her eyes red but unashamed. And then, very gently, she began to speak. It wasn't a casual story. It was childhood pain, unspoken loss, things she'd never shared with anyone, until that moment. With a total stranger. I didn't understand why at first. But over time, I learned something. Some people don't come to talk. They come to open a long locked door inside someone else. And you, Sagittarius, are one of them. Your aura isn't just light. It's space, a realm where others feel safe enough to remove the mask. Not because you ask. Not because you pry. But because your energy allows it. It does not judge. It does not try to fix. It simply exists, and because of that, pain gets a chance to exhale. People trust you without knowing why. They tell you things they've never admitted to anyone. That is not coincidence. It is clear proof that your aura is strong enough to hold what is fragile. The lesson here is: you are not just a good listener. You are the space where stories are born. And that's not easy. To be the place where someone can sit down and lay down their pain. You must have walked through many lonely nights. You must have carried cracks that seemed impossible to heal. You must have learned how not to react, not to judge, not to fix. Just to be present. If you've ever received a spontaneous confession from a stranger, or been entrusted with someone's deepest truth within minutes, it's not because you're charming. It's because your soul is quiet enough for another soul to finally be honest. Leave me a sentence if this has ever happened to you, so that those like you can recognize each other. I didn't ask, but they still chose to tell. Because sometimes, people don't need someone to answer. They just need somewhere true enough to speak the sadness aloud, and you are that place. True freedom doesn't come from distant travels, from living unbound, or from speaking lofty ideals. Freedom, for people like you, is when you can live authentically. Without asking permission. Without performing a role. Without shrinking yourself just to be loved. But that very freedom makes others uneasy. As a Sagittarius, you carry the light of a soul that has shattered society's masks. You don't live to please. You live to be honest with your deepest self. And that makes you an unspoken challenge to anyone still hiding behind layers of pretense. You don't accuse anyone. But your presence asks, silently, are you living true to yourself? And that question, even unspoken, makes many feel unsteady. Some retreat. Some lash out. Some envy you without knowing why. Because light isn't always welcomed, especially when it shines on what wasn't ready to be seen. The lesson here is: your inner freedom may be liberation for one person, and a threat to another. But that is not your burden to carry. You weren't born to shrink so others can be comfortable. You were born to be living proof that living true is absolutely possible. And living free isn't selfish, it's an act of courage. In a world where most people chase roles, someone like you will always stand out, sometimes misunderstood, often isolated. But true light doesn't need crowds. It just needs honesty. It needs to keep shining, not to be praised, but to stay faithful to itself. If you've ever felt rejected simply for being more real than people expected, if you've ever made someone feel threatened just because you didn't live by their rules, then you are not alone. You are one of the few bringing awareness to this world, even at the price of solitude. And if that has ever hurt you, let me remind you of one thing. You don't need to apologize for living true. You just need to keep walking, so that those searching for themselves know they are not alone. If this touches you, leave me a sentence from the heart. I don't live to please. I live to be true. Because for some, just seeing you is proof that freedom is real. Have you ever walked into a room, no one says a word, but you still sense that something has shifted? A breath of air just moved. A glance touched the silent space. Something invisible reached another before you even spoke. If you've experienced that moment, perhaps you carry an energy field so powerful that it makes the world around you pause. And if you're a Sagittarius, the child of Jupiter, symbol of expansion, truth, and spiritual journey, your presence isn't just part of that room. You're not just in the room, you are the room. You're the wind carrying truth, the light that makes others unable to continue living in the darkness they've grown accustomed to. You don't need to be loud, nor wear flamboyant layers. Your aura, that pure and intense energy field, arrives before you do. And the truth is, not everyone is ready to face such a source of energy. As someone who has weathered many ups and downs, you know well that some things in life can't be explained in words. There are moments, intuitions, deep feelings that don't lie on the surface but touch the soul directly. You don't need proof, nor others' acknowledgement, because you feel it with all you've lived through. That is the clearest manifestation of aura. Throughout your life, you may have been misunderstood, envied, or kept at a distance simply because you're real. But today, you'll understand that it's precisely that realness, the energy you bring with you every time you're present. That is the gift the universe has given you. On this journey, we'll explore 13 signs that your aura, especially as a Sagittarius, is so strong it unsettles others. Not to change yourself, but to recognize your own value. And if you stay until the end, you'll see that light doesn't need to be noisy to be noticed. It just needs to be honest. Listen. Feel with your whole soul. And if your heart recognizes itself in every word, don't hesitate to leave a sign of connection with a simple statement, "My aura speaks before I do." Those who truly walk the path of awakening will recognize each other without introductions. I once sat silently in a meeting, among well-dressed, articulate people, and everything seemed to be functioning as it should. But in that silence, I felt something very strange. A man walked in, didn't speak, didn't seek attention, didn't even try to impress, but the atmosphere in that room changed immediately. Every glance brushed past him, then turned away, then tried to sneak another look. Something about him made people both curious and cautious, feeling as if they couldn't avoid being confronted. At that time, I couldn't name that feeling, but years later, I realized that was aura. And later, when my life's journey led me to the world of astrology, I understood more clearly that man was a Sagittarius. And what he carried, not boastful confidence, but an undeniable presence of someone who has reconciled reason and soul. You know, a true Sagittarius doesn't need to say much to make others reflect on themselves. They don't need to take center stage, because they are the center, not of the spotlight, but of energy. And the first sign that your aura is strong enough to unsettle others is this. You can't be ignored, even when you don't speak. What you carry isn't an appearance. It's being true to yourself, the freedom to live authentically, and the quiet light of a soul that has fallen, risen, and kept moving forward. Others feel you're there, even when you're not trying at all. But precisely because of that, you'll always make some people uneasy, because your aura arrives first. And it speaks directly to their subconscious, where they've buried too many things they're afraid to name. This can make you feel lonely in a world that prefers the understandable, the controllable. But don't step back. The profound lesson here is, not everyone is born to follow the beaten path. Some people, like you, are made to awaken what's dormant in others. And that is something truly sacred. Remember, your aura is the whisper of your soul. And if you've ever felt misunderstood just because you're too real, then please don't change. Let those who are searching for themselves see the light in you, a light that doesn't scream, but never gets extinguished. If these words resonate with you, leave me a sign, just one sentence. But it's the key for us to recognize each other in the crowd. I'm here, no need to explain. Have you ever wondered why some people react strangely upon meeting you for the first time? Not because you've done anything wrong, not because you've said anything hurtful, but you still receive wary glances, interrupted looks, or unusual silences in conversation. Some people seem distant, while others seem drawn to you but don't dare come closer. You feel you're causing something. even though you're just being yourself. And I want to tell you this, a profound truth I had to learn through many years of feeling lost. A strong aura isn't always welcomed, especially for a Sagittarius who carries the light of truth, intuition, and spiritual freedom. You don't need to open your mouth for someone to feel seen through. You don't need to touch them for them to feel exposed. That's not your fault. That's how your aura works. Carl Jung once said that everyone carries a shadow, a collection of rejected, buried, and forgotten parts so we can be accepted. But that shadow doesn't die. It just waits for a light real enough to unsettle it. And you, a Sagittarius carrying Jupiter's energy, are that light. Not everyone is ready to face the darkness within themselves. And when they're not ready, they'll push you away. They'll think you're too straightforward, too hard to understand, or even too different. But you know what? It's that very light that makes you necessary. Because some souls, though they don't understand why, feel healed just by being near you. Some people will be confused, but some will awaken, and that's why you shouldn't hide yourself. The lesson here isn't about making others understand you immediately. It's about daring to live authentically, even when no one stands by you. Because one day, the light you carry won't make others anxious anymore, it'll become a place for them to return to. If you're hearing these words and feel something inside you gently resonate, that's not a coincidence. Maybe you've endured judgmental looks just because you're too real, too deep, too unlike anyone else. But don't fold yourself to fit into a world that's not wide enough. Write me a line, so we can recognize each other among the millions of sounds drowning out what truly needs to be heard. I'm not hurting anyone, I'm just making them face themselves. I remember a late year afternoon, walking in a forest near the American countryside, where only the wind whispered through the pines and my footsteps lightly touched the ground. At that moment, I felt something very alive, but not from things visible to the eye. It came from an invisible familiarity between me and nature. A small deer stood a few steps away, not running. A sparrow landed near my feet without fear. And then, I realized, there's a language that doesn't need words, still makes all things trust. It's an aura so genuine and quiet that even nature feels that safe presence. As a Sagittarius, you possess a frequency that makes children, animals, and even plants feel at ease. Not because you're gentle or cautious, but because the energy you carry isn't fake, isn't calculating, isn't harmful. It's something the primal world understands, because it's pure.